Are we wired? Okay, ready? You have a reasonable amount of information about our next speaker in your program. I trust you have read it. I will not try to repeat it. But it has been my privilege and pleasure to know Dr. Gary Gordon for 20-plus years. I first heard him back in the late 70s when he was one of the leading men in alternative therapies, complementary therapies, whatever you want to call it, in California. He took a few years off, and he can explain that to you if he wants to, and did an enormous amount of research. Now his new clinic is located in Payson, Arizona, and he'll tell you more about that as we go along. He's lectured worldwide to big crowds, medium-sized crowds, other crowds. He has everything organized. He has a website, has several employees down there in Payson, and starting up another clinic focusing on longevity. So, without any further ado, let's bring him on so he has a maximum amount of time. Dr. Gary Gordon,
thank you.
Your man.
Thank you. I really thank Dean for this opportunity to follow such two dynamic speakers which have set the stage perfectly for what I want to do here, which is consciousness raising. This whole field of longevity medicine, folks, is moving so fast that none of you can possibly hope to keep up with the implications of what's happening. The stuff on the Human Genome Project, which you keep hearing about, seems impractical to a lot of us because we think, oh, well, that's going to be years before it's going to have clinical applicability to help my daughter who's dying, or my husband, or myself. CNN this last weekend showed you that you're dead wrong if you're not keeping up, because they showed that they've overcome the problems. It's been well covered, and it'll be in my slides, but I've got to get your attention. The fact that I was paid a very kind compliment by the previous speaker, Steve Chernisko, I have great respect for. He says, listen to Dr. Gordon, and you can pretty well learn how to take care of cancer and heart disease. Well, obviously, in an hour, I can't bring you my 40-plus years of practice. I got my license in 1958. I'm 65 years of age. I specialize in training doctors. I have a full library with over 5,000 square feet of my material I've collected from around the world. I have receipts for over $1 million for what my education has cost in the last 8 years alone. As a result of being on this program, thank you, I was invited to speak in Seoul, Korea. That was part of the trips that I've made around the world and been every place. And the picture that we have to give you is that you don't have to get completely down about the political concerns we have if you go the next step and realize that we have the technology, we have the money, we have the knowledge, and if you suddenly make everybody in this audience stop aging tomorrow, and what you've got today is what you get to keep. Because, folks, that's what's going to happen. Within 10 years, you will not have to age another iota. And if that's the case, why are we all taking the time to talk about it? Let's go on. Well, the reason is, in 10 years, some of you are going to age a lot, and some of you are going to be dead. So we have to give you those tools so that you have the opportunity to get what I call your owner's manual, because this Human Genome Project makes it clear that, yes, one person got well with their St. John wort, and the next guy got well with his Zissaic, and the next one did it with prayer, and the next one slept under a magnet, and the next one went and had hands-on healing. Everybody, it's all true. But that didn't mean it was right for you or your daughter, your loved ones. We do have a way to differentiate what works for you. We have intuitives, we have muscle testers who really are accurate, and then we have the Vol method where we put electrical current into your acupoint. And if your lung reading is low, about 97% of the time, if it's significantly low, you're starting down the pathway of lung cancer. save you a lot of time and money, because I used to be in radiology. It takes 7 years to see, and cancer, for 7 years, if that reading was low, folks, or if one of the cancer markers that will point you in the direction of getting, if you failed one of those cancer markers, like the PSA for prostate or CEA, any of these tumor markers, you can change the outcome. Now, changing the outcome is going to be a lot easier if you pay attention to what some of these speakers have been saying. They're saying, hey, folks, it's a total program. You've got to have the right thoughts. That helps a lot. Maybe not live in a poisoned house, not clean your house with poisons, not ingest poisons. So, so if we have this thing coming down the pathway, Solera corporations and other companies, Miravant, there's some things there that are going to change the world. And to back that up, let's make it clear. The baby boys, the bubble boys in Paris that had to live in a bubble because they had no immune system have been one injection, and now it's been a year, and they're completely able to play with normal children. And we now have the studies going on for the hemophilias, which you know is genetic. And one injection on the dog model for hemophilia, and the dogs no longer have hemophilia. And what happened this weekend on the cancer patients, a third of them complete remission and all of them showing clear-cut response, tells you that between those things, and that doesn't even touch on stem cells. Stem cells are the baby cells that we have in our body. So if you fall down and you lose all the skin on your arm, you don't cry too bad because you know that you're going to fill it in again. Our body has stem cells carefully stored everywhere, including our brain. And we now see that if we just take your own stem cells, you can repair your brain even after you've been paralyzed and not talk for 7 years. Pretty exciting stuff. Now, obviously, we want to make this much more scientific. There's a lot of things happening. Johns Hopkins has made the ability now for us to make your own stem cells in unlimited quantities. We'll soon be turning those into your replacement kidney of your kidney, or heart, or lung, or tooth, or whatever you need. That's all on the drawing board. It's happening now. So if we see the picture, the slides will make a lot more sense now with that background. This is a talk I gave to a group of doctors because it's my privilege to train doctors, and I set up the International College for Advanced Longevity Medicine, and I'm on the board of homeopathic and alternative medical examiners in Arizona. And my job there is to give a climate that the brightest doctors can get into this kind of medicine, and still I have the privilege and duty of protecting the public. So we're going to have to turn off that overhead tube. Immortality is kind of some of the books that are out there now, and that's a little shocking, but how science is extending your lifespan, changing the world. The bookstore I picked up this morning had one of the magazines from Scientific American, came out this month with all of the data you need to see that the top scientists in the field of aging at the National Institute of Aging are all completely happy today with the idea that we definitely can significantly extend lifespan. So if you understand that that's what's happening with the scientists, the health food store people are getting into the scene, and they're going to start to have some ideas of what's going to happen. And I believe that all of us are going to pay a lot more attention to this fuel that we have to convert into our bodies. And the exciting thing is that the government has been fiddling around with this because it's so political, but we can take tests on you, obvious. If you can read close and read far away, that's pretty handy. If you can blow out all the candles when you're 90, it suggests you're a lot younger than the other 90-year-olds. If your reflexes, your memory, your recall, your muscle strength. So measuring aging to state, as Dr. Chernisk has done an excellent job of explaining, he's using the catabolic anabolic index, and as a licensed physician, having to protect the public from doctors who may just jump into a piece of this and want to sell everybody growth hormone injections for $1,000 a month. You know, fine, be it. If the patient's fully informed, you can buy anything you want. But it's my job because I, at 65, want to live a long time. I want to make this field as credible and legitimate as possible. So I'm teaching you today that there are world-class scientists like Dr. Balin, who agreed to be on the board of my college for teaching doctors longevity medicine. and Dr. Ward Dean, who's also on the board. And so these are all colleagues of mine that all agree that the new medical practice that I want to take doctors into, because I don't want the constraints on our medical practice that occurs if we are practicing insurance-fed HMO type in medicine. It won't work. This has to be ego medicine. This has to be like you decide you don't want the wrinkle and you pay the plastic surgeon $5,000 to get rid of the wrinkle. I am moving this medicine into an era so we won't have government interference. You're going to have to pay out of cash out of your pocket, which means I have to train doctors to protect you and to give doctors the knowledge of what we do. The National Institute of Health has a National Institute of Aging, and there are really good people there, like Dick Cutler, who's been there 18 years, a friend of mine, now lives in Phoenix. And we had waited for them now for years to establish at a government level what are the tests. Dr. Chernitzky is doing a good job of giving you one. I'm telling you lots, and your imagination will see that some of us are obviously functioning a lot younger than other people. And that's what I mean by biological. You all got that message. Life Extension is run by a friend of mine, Saul Kent. One man said, I'm going to live a long time. I've known him for 30 years. You go to lef.org. That's Life Extension Foundation, lef.org. And you will have tons of legitimate information. He really takes 10% of what they sell, and I'm a competitor of his in a sense. My significant other has a company, Longevity Plus, and we supply products to doctors, and he sells products directly to the informed end user that's into anti-aging. But Life Extension helped put the money up, that put the money in Mike West's pocket, that put him on 2020 to talk about some of this research that's mind-blowing between stem cells and telomeres and Human Genome Project. But stem cells have been cloned, folks, human stem cells. Now that doesn't mean it's all Greek, but wait a minute. I'm 65, and if you gave me an injection of these stem cells, which I have friends who are buying them now at $25,000 a shot, a lot of money. But the price is going to come down because soon we'll be making your own. That's what I'm preparing you for. So when you take a shot at $25,000, those are really from aborted fetuses in Russia from women that absolutely couldn't afford to carry the conception forward. We won't have to get into that ethical problem. They will be scraping of your tongue, and it'll be your cells. So you won't have any ethical issue. It's going to be finances. But if I put those stem cells into any person, we have proof now that we are even taking a dead body and taking the pancreas and fusing the pancreatic cells into a diabetic, and they don't need insulin anymore. These cells are pretty clever, folks. These are the cells that we're made from, and these cells have the ability to be nerve, brain, muscle, anything you want them to be. And if you don't even know what you want them to be, we inject them and they go through your body and say, yeah, he needs a couple more brain cells. He needs like a few more heart cells, maybe a few more kidney cells, a little bit of liver help. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about repairing. This is not like Firestone having to have a defective recall. There's no defects in these. These are real. And the Genome Project, as I've already indicated to you, isn't just that we're finding out how different we all are. When we're different, just because a woman carries the risk of breast cancer in her family, she doesn't have to cut her breasts off. That's what they're doing today. She doesn't have to do that. Because you carry a risk of a disease, it doesn't have to express itself, because you can be smart enough to know how to get your owner's manual and find out, are you a type A person, which may not be doing very well with dairy products and wheat your whole life? Or are you somebody who has high fasting insulin, in which case the carbohydrates don't agree as easily, and so the Atkins diet isn't as dumb as people think for that person? Or are you somebody who's just become allergic to many, many things because, as Dr. Dickey was saying, we have knocked the heck out of our immune system. I have an answer for that, and I'll be giving out, I brought enough for everybody in this audience at the table back there, an article about chelation therapy that will explain to you that when we had Ethel Corporation put lead into gasoline, we wound up with every blade of grass on earth and every hair of every mouse loaded with so much lead that if I take any dead person in this room, your bones have 1,000 times more lead than any dead bodies from before the industrial age. So I don't have to be a big psychic to say she has lead poisoning. And last year, the American Journal of Cardiology said the people who are dying of heart failure have 20,000 times more antimony, cadmium, mercury, and lead. None of you have seen this, and you're not learning this anywhere, but it's my field of expertise to be fully aware of what science is coming down with. And I will explain to you why you can stop all heart attacks by never again having a clot, and how the clot is because of the infections. And we can have lots of concerns, and that's why we have some interesting folks in this audience, because yeah, a couple of those infections, which I'll get into, do come from HHV6 and Mycoplasma incognito fermentans, and it is upsetting when you find that there's patents on those by Division of Biological Warfare, United States Army. It's not encouraging to find that maybe we've been playing around with stuff. But we can correct gene mutations, and we can teach you that there's a Society of Gene Therapy, and this work with Dr. Fisher in Paris with the babies now having complete recovery from severe combined immune deficiency. This is real, folks. It's not my imagination. And so as we start to see, Dr. Fossel is a good friend of mine, trained at Stanford, MD, PhD. He was the one that came up with this simple idea that you need to keep on making these new cells. Like Chernisk is saying to us, the brain has got to have that message, and he's completely right. You've learned today that if we're going to stay in good health until we can do some of these magic tricks, we might want to learn about nutrition and hormonal support, like Chernisk is telling us about, and enzymes really are the drug of the future. I have the privilege of working with the Mucose Company of Germany. They're a $400 million company, and the German government pays them millions of dollars each year for an enzyme that's taken between meals because they proved cancer patients live 30% longer if they get just the enzyme, no matter what else they do. Or arthritis patients do far better than any of the current therapies for arthritis. So yeah, today you're learning about enzymes and hormonal support, and these are things that we're all going to be learning about. We know that we're spending right now about $20 million with our animal colony at the National Institute of Aging to prove that if we restrict calories to the monkeys, that they absolutely live longer. And the pictures are so dramatic that it makes you go and look at your meal and say, God, do I really want to eat that food? The picture of caloric deprivation, obviously not many of us are going to get comfortable with that idea, but when you begin to get Beatrice Trumhunter's book out and read how much PCBs and DDT. There isn't anything you can find anywhere in the world that doesn't have DDT in. I don't care if you take the liver out of a polar bear at the Antarctic, it's loaded with DDT, folks. So yeah, you could get suspicious of your food, and it isn't just that. It's like Steve Chernisk is telling you, that metabolic model he's got is a great model. But if you have 1,000 times more lead, what do you think lead knocks out? It knocks out zinc, and zinc is the key step in the activation of most enzymes. So we have a logical reason that people who've sworn they took chelation therapy and it helped them tremendously. But the problem with it is it didn't always clean arteries. They just had the energy now to run up the hill. They might still have a blocked artery, and that confused the patient. That's part of the reason I've written this article, is to reposition chelation for what we knew it does. With work I'm doing, I'm not at liberty to reveal everything, but some of it's on patents pending, but animal model is living 20% longer with a particular iron chelator. And with the particular studies we've done with EDTA, which is not an iron chelator specifically, it will take some, but it's really more active on lead, we saw a 50% increase in lifespan. So I'm kind of looking at the model today of taking all the toxins out of me so that my metabolic machinery can work as efficiently as possible. And then as the Genome Project unwinds, I'll find out why I, at age 29, had disabling angina and was so sick I couldn't stand on my feet for many years, and why at age 65 I can do much more than I ever could at 30, because I've learned to not resent the cost that's costing me $300 a month at my cost to take all the stuff, which I will hand out to you, it's on the table, of what I take. From lipoic acid to carnitine to stuff you don't want to have to know about. But I'm at the point, I think I want to be younger next year. And I had the privilege of doing Steve's anabolic catabolic test, and I think they told me I was about the highest they'd ever seen. Anyway, on this particular magazine, we found out that there is some genetic reasons that caloric deprivation is working, besides the fact that everything you eat has to be metabolized through a pathway called the production of free radicals, and everything you eat has something wrong with it. We can't find a perfect food unless you raise it in your backyard, pick it when it's ripe, and have it on balanced soil in which you've measured the soil and assured that the soil had enough zinc, selenium, etc. We have an awful lot of deaths in China from disease of a child called Kishan because there's no selenium in their soil. So this is simply pointing out that we think from this research that it's not going to be a waste of our time, even if you won't cut down on how much you eat. We might be able to upregulate, it appears, with niacin and niacinamide, a particular gene that is the one that is getting the actual benefit from your not eating so many calories. So there's always going to be spin-offs, like there was spin-offs of going to the moon. Now, we have 58% of Americans swallowing supplements today, a vitamin mineral. All of those supplements, with the exception of what I've been doing for 20 years, contain iron. We have a disease called hereditary hemochromatosis, which affects directly 1.5 million Americans, and another 35 million carry the single allele for the disease, meaning they won't get sick unless they take an iron pill every day and get extra vitamin C, which reduces iron and doubles its absorption. So we have 35 million Americans getting things like diabetes and infections that no one can treat from simple taking of the wrong multiple. All the multiples that I have designed, it will get to the point when I'm done training doctors, no one will give a patient iron without a proven need. Iron is so toxic it makes mercury, which is from every dentist's office and all the fillings in your mouth, and lead that's in every blade of grass and everything you eat. It makes it look innocuous. That's how bad iron is. It catalyzes free radicals by 1,000-fold. A third of diabetics are not diabetic if they just go and give enough blood. And giving blood makes people live longer in all the studies. So iron's a problem for us all. And we won't spend any more time on that. Progesterone, you heard Steve mention. John Lee, his book is great. I, as a man, am taking progesterone in addition to androstenedione and pregnenolone and DHEA. That's one of the reasons that at age 65, I clearly am finding that, like he says, easier to open the door, I can do more each year because I'm learning all these things. And yes, it is nice if you have a doctor, but I am a physician and it costs me $3,000 to $5,000 a year to monitor all the stuff that I have to do because I can't afford to be wrong because I have doctors I'm training. So my body is a bit of a guinea pig for all this. Is your office home killing you? Well, last night, Larry King had on the issue of cellular phones, and they said, maybe we better be a little concerned, folks. I've decided to have the company that I consult for, Longevity Plus, carry a cleaner that will get all the poisons out from the kitchen sink and the bleaches and Ajax and the stuff that's killing. Yeah, there is a real problem on getting free, clean air. And so any step that you make in this field, because I happen to sleep on a particular magnetic bed, I happen to utilize all kinds of tricks in terms of water, what kind of water I use, and when you hear the story, as was so well covered by Dr. Dickey today, Dickey Fuller, she talked about the fact that we have to break these proteins down in our stomach. Guess what, folks? And she covered it. She said, when you take those Tums, you go into such low level of alkalinity that the body says, whoa, there's no alkaline here at all. And it turns out, no, it says there's no acid, and it turns around and makes acid, which is why the public is so confused. We have all these people taking Zantac, Pepsid, and Tums, and guess what it's doing? Help killing them. How could I say that? I'm a nutritionist. I'm an expert at nutrition. Take a simple fact. You have all these 58% of people swallowing a vitamin, and it's got 400 units of D. And the doctors watch, 1 out of 2 women at age 50 have weak bones, and by age 65, it's almost as bad for men. Our bones are going away, folks. Well, in the old days, it used to be pretty simple. If you didn't have calcium in your bones, you might see how the D is to make the calcium work, right? Measure it. astonishing thing. 43% of people swallowing a vitamin don't have adequate D. And now we're all afraid to get in the sun, which is where we made D. These are interesting issues, folks, and they're issues that have a lot to do with how much of a bang for the buck am I going to get when I take my stem cell versus how much of a bang are you going to get. We have Gulf War syndrome, we have fibromyalgia, we have multiple sclerosis and lupus, and guess what? We now have the ability to grow out of dead bodies. Anybody who dies at this point with a heart attack, if you simply cut them open right now, take the plaque, you can find the plaque that caused the blood clot in 85% of them. And that plaque, folks, cannot be seen on an arteriogram, which tells you everybody that you know that's had a bypass has been operated on for a disease that has got nothing to do with whether the liver died. There is an element of truth. If I take a pipeline to the engine and I close it halfway, that engine sure can't pull the trailer up the mountain the way it used to. So when they're operating on obstruction, they're going to get some benefit. But at what risk? How many people die? How many billions go into that stupid game? We'll get into that slide that lets you know that I am not the one that's blowing the whistle on that. The president of the American Heart Association, MD, PhD cardiologist Mount Sinai, is saying, folks, treat the bloodstream and not the blood vessel. And that's what I'll be teaching you about. This word hypercoagulable, I'm going to drill it in your brain. And then I'll cheat and I'll say thick blood, which is not a nice way. It's cheating, because that's a $1,000 test to measure hypercoagulability. The leading labs in my town, and this research, folks, is extraordinary. When we thin the blood of anybody who's really sick with either heparin injections or the active enzyme. Now, just to save you some money, we sell one called Wobenzyme. When you bite the pill, it needs to start to tenderize your tongue within the first minute or two, or it's inactive and you don't have to waste your money. So that way you'll know that, because bromelain, which is what we've proven will reverse the hypercoagulability, has got to be active enough, or you'll need the injections of heparin morning and night for a long time. We can get about 95% if we get enough of the bromelain, but we have a neat trick we did with the enzyme Wobenzyme. Guess what we put in there? Rutin, which is, to all of you, like quercetin, a bioflavonoid, the white of the orange. It's also an iron chelator, folks, and by chelating iron, you don't have the problem of the bugs being able to grow. And I'm telling you, every dead body we can find infection in so many places. You're hearing about the cavitations in the mouth with wisdom tooth. You're hearing about these kind of things. But vulnerable plaque was the latest thing. January 11th, 1999, it hit the front page of the country, and a few months later, it's front page of Wall Street Journal. And it says everybody thought it was this junk you could see with the arteriogram, and that's why we have 400,000 people being operated on for the wrong operation. The Wall Street says, wait a minute, heart disease, we think it's inflammation. That's a big word, folks. How are we going to put out inflammation? How are you going to put it out? Well, if it turns out it's due to chlamydia and cytomegalic and HHV6, you're going to have to learn a lot about infection, unless I teach you about transfer factor, which we happen to have worked out. Coronary thrombosis, that means clot in the heart. Heart attack. Fuster, immediate past present, American Heart Association. This is some of his earlier work. He is the expert on how you die of blood clots and how lousy aspirin is and how incomplete and dangerous. Because it fools you. You think you're doing something. It only gets one of the three pathways, and we kill 3,000 people a year, bleed internally to death. In our country, folks, the leading use of blood in our blood banks is to replace the blood that you guys lose from picking up over-the-counter aspirin and NSAIDs like ibuprofen for your painful joints, which the enzyme Wobenzyme beats in any study and has never killed one patient. So that's kind of interesting news. So current anticoagulant agents interfere only partly with the whole thing. So we have had to come up with, using the natural product industry, can you guys think of a blood thinner? Garlic, ginkgo, vitamin E, salmon oil. Yeah, we've got answers, folks. We don't have to use the drugs. This is the book which I have carried to every meeting. It's the first meeting I don't carry. It's only $115, and it's published by the American Heart Association, and it's the book in which Fuster blew the lid. Chief of Cardiology, Mount Sinai, New York City. And he's not the only one out there. Rifkin is the head at Harvard. He spoke to our group a few months ago. His research on C-reactive protein, which is the way to tell roughly how active your infections are, because we've all got infections, lots of them. There's lots of little bugs and guys living with us. This guy is co-edited by all the rest of the vascular lesion committee, so this book is not just one man's opinion. These are all the non-operating cardiologists who hate the $500,000 incomes their buddies are making from splitting people open for needless surgery. You heard me, needless. My entire business this time is based on oral chelation and Wobenzym, and that's when somebody calls me, they could be the most famous guru of India, and he's blocked 90% in 3 vessels. He's a Columbia Presbyterian. They're going to operate tomorrow. I said, well, if you're alive today, why would you die tomorrow? You know, as long as it's open a little bit today, why would you let it close? 85% of the time, it's a clot. I'm pretty good at thinning blood. And I can ski down the hill and fall down the steps. I don't turn black and blue. I am not using their drugs. Pfizer expects to make $10 billion a year in the year 2004 from their new antiplatelet. They know what I'm telling you. They plan to put these surgeons out of business. Here's the infection, folks. It comes in your lung, and it goes through the bloodstream. And it finds places that are called plaque, and it finds other areas in your body that are devitalized, and it sets up home and it never leaves. And when we take those plaques off your vessels, we find human herpes virus 6 and mycoplasma incognito and chlamydia and cytomegalic and helicobacter from the teeth. I mean, this is the cellar and the attic of your house. And you know, if you have a cellar and an attic, it collects junk. So you don't want plaque on your vessels. Yet the Iceman, 5,000-year-old Iceman, is loaded with plaque from top to bottom. So you can't blame the television industry, and you can't blame the telephones. It's more complex. But wait a minute. Maybe there's 2 diseases operating here. Maybe we always had lumpy, bumpy arteries because our arteries do respond with a mutagenic response in every human in America. Eating what you eat, I don't care how careful you are, if we check your fecal stream, it is loaded with mutagens and carcinogens. You're bathing your guts constantly in cancer-causing chemicals. Of course, you can control it a little bit with vitamin C. So I put together a vitamin C that is no one's seen before with some MSM and trimethylglycine and other stuff to help change that. But we obviously have to get everything out of you rapidly. The longer it's in you, the more these dangerous biochemical reactions go on. But it's this little fact that these infections are in every part of our body, and we now implicate infection in everything. So, yep, they've been operating on the wrong plaque. And the New England Journal of Medicine came out March 23rd this year with Dr. Ridker, who was our speaker at our academy. And here's Chief of Cardiology at Harvard speaking to the doctors that I have the privilege, because I formed ACAM because of my own dramatic response. On the 8th treatment to IV chelation, I turned into Superman. For the first time in my life, I've always been a wimp, could never do anything athletic, couldn't even participate in physical education, had murmur, all this nonsense. 8th treatment, I go up a 2,000 elevated mountain, and my Irish setter is running behind me, going into and I can't get tired. Somebody took me from 110 to 220 with chelation. And I sit there, and I'm a doctor, and I say, wait a minute. This happened to me years ago, and I knew my arteries weren't that blocked. What happened? What did I do to the energy? The engine in your cell, folks, is the mitochondria. And that's why I now use lots of tricks to get this benefit for many people, because not everybody can afford to sit around and have a needle in their arm. And I have to protect the public, since I'm in charge of peer review for chelation in the state of Arizona. So I have to have you who do buy chelation know what you're buying. I can't have you walk in and say, I'm 90% blocked and they're going to operate on me next week, and you take 30 or 40 chelation, and now you're playing tennis, and you assume that the blockage is gone, because that blockage is much more complex. And I've had to get up in front of the 1,000 doctors who belong and tell them, doctors, you have to become experts at risk factors. And risk factors are chlamydia titers and cytomegalic and oxidized LDL. Oxidized. That's the one that's rancid. They don't even offer that test at your usual hospital. And then anti-endothelial cell antibodies. And then we get into fibrinogen. Fibrinogen goes up on everybody as we age. And now the big word is soluble fibrin monomer. That's a big word, SFM. But it's gone from 10 papers 5 years ago to 1,000 papers last year, and it's now implicated in fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, every disease. This issue of fibrinogen is the easier word for you to remember than the more complicated one, but we can change fibrinogen, the only known enzyme in the world that does it, and the only known treatment that I know of. Right now, the journal came out last week, New England Journal, saying, if you can't get the C-reactive protein down on the guy after his surgery, he's going to have a high chance of dying. C-reactive protein goes up every time you see the dentist and he cleans your teeth. C-reactive protein is telling your body that it's reacting to the bugs that we have circulating uncontrolled. And when you have a Coke for 5 hours, no white cell will eat any bugs. So you've got to be pretty fussy about what you do. But these tests are what I have to train the doctors, and then the public will be protected. We have those kind of tests for cancer. But we have to train everybody how to get these. And if you expect your insurance to pay for all of it, forget it. HMOs are going to continue. It's a $50 test for C-reactive, and anybody with a high C-reactive having bypass surgery next week, you know what they're doing, folks? They're operating on an infected area. And doctors were taught, never do elective surgery on an infected area. You're spreading the infection, and that's why they're admitting. But fortunately, those of us who are in this room are going to get a really interesting arrangement. We have 6 books describing the $50 million of the research we have on Wobenzyme. We've made arrangements for those books to be made available to you at half off and free if you order any of the products. So we're going to get this knowledge in your hands so that your friends who are, you know, I take people off Coumadin. Why? I happen to be licensed physician, MD in California, DO in Nevada, homeopathic physician in Arizona. How could I take the nerve when God has said, you've got a valve, you better live on Coumadin, rat poison, the rest of your life, even if you felt like hell the day you first took the pill? Well, as an expert, I can do these tests and show the patient how lousy their protection is, and then I can record the informed consent, and the patient can decide that that's inadequate coverage I'm getting from rat poison. I'm willing to bet my life that Dr. Gordon knows what he's talking about. So coagulation parameters, ProTime, APT, don't want to get into the names. It sounds a little complicated, but that's what I have to train doctors on. This laboratory in Phoenix is the one who is absolutely the leader in this field of finding what no one has seen before. He's the only guy that's put together a $1,000 panel. If you tell your doctors there's a $1,000 panel for hypercoagulability, they say, I've never heard of it. Well, sure. You have to read the journal on thrombosis. Who's got time to read the journal on blood thickness? Nobody. But this guy does, and it turned out that he's the guy that found irritable bowel and Lyme and infertility and spontaneous miscarriages all have starvation of the involved tissues because the blood is getting so thick right where the infection is most active, because your body says, God, I don't want these TB organisms in his brain and his toe. I want to wall it off. And it walls it off so well that they give you the antibiotics and nothing happens. I had a patient try my tricks, which I'm handing out to you, the entire trick. She was living on IV antibiotics in the hospital, not responding, staying at 104 fever. They said, we're going to have to operate tomorrow. At that point, she got scared enough. She had her family smuggle in Dr. Gordon's handy-dandy enzymes and his transfer factor and his vitamin C, and she took aggressive levels, you might say. 20 transfer factor, 40 Wobenzyme. In 4 hours, the fever broke. I had a child that was they were going to do a heart transplant in the St. Louis Children's Hospital, and I said to them, I said, look it. The heart in the child is clearly filling the entire lung cavity. This child is really sick. There's no question. They said, yeah, and the child could die any minute. I said, wait a minute. I'm an expert in my field. I'm a member of the American College of Nutrition. I'm a member of the AMA. I'm a member of I'm still a scientist, you know, just because I think differently. Have you measured the child's carnitine? No. Have you thought about giving the child coenzyme Q? No. Have you measured magnesium? No. I said, until those things are done, I will absolutely tell the family not to have any transplantation of a heart into this 18-month-old child. It took only a few minutes. And we had a private healing ceremony, okay, in the intensive care. No nurses allowed, family surrounding the bed, so we could put under the tongue of the child all these nasty, noxious things that Dr. Gordon believes in. Garlic, vitamin C, magnesium, coenzyme Q, these weird things. The child's color went from blue to normal in less than 4 hours. The pulse dropped from 200 down to 140. And they were able to sign out against medical advice. And would you think, if you were a pediatric surgeon that had told somebody that they had to have their child have a transplant, and you knew Dr. Gordon was involved because I talked to them on the phone, would you think they'd be interested? Yeah, they were interested. They wrote a letter to my board of medical examiners in Arizona and said, stop this doctor. He just cost us a patient. I mean, they're really upset. They never asked the family, what did he do? Anyhow, it's an exciting world. So the danger of chronic inflammation is real. Platelet aggregation testing can be done. Homocysteine is real. I am so convinced that it ties to aging and to cancer and everything that I put together a sublingual form of B that will bring homocysteine in conjunction with our vitamin C down to levels that are ideal for long-term health. It was front page of Newsweek if you haven't heard the word. So I'm taking you into this whole spectrum of risk factors. You cannot expect a magic bullet, folks. I don't care if your neighbor is doing hands-on healing. That's wonderful. I believe in all forms of healing, but I haven't thrown out the scientific method too. We can combine them. There's nothing wrong with knowledge. Knowledge is power, and that's why you're here. So if you think you can know whether or not that depressed, now forgetful father of yours is adequate on B12, forget it, folks. The blood test won't tell you if they need B12. Only methylmalonic acid testing on the urine. So that costs enough, forget it. I put the power of a shot in a pill, I put it for sublingual, and you can test Granddad, and if in 1 month he now seems to be able to read the newspaper and drives to doesn't get lost going to the store, you don't have to put him in the old folks home yet. So hypercoagulability is a big deal. This oxidative therapy, I'm on the board of oxidative where we use Ozine and hyperbaric and intravenous peroxide. It's exciting because it's a quick way with oxidative to ramp up the phagocytic index. That's how many bugs or cancer cells can a white cell digest without getting a tummy ache. And that's what we do with oxidative. So Dr. Fuster is going to help the pharmaceutical industry like Pfizer come up with a drug that they're going to ramp up the old folks program, so the government's going to buy her this drug. And right now Vioxx is $100 a month like Celebrex. And that's wonderful, folks, because it's only killing half as many people as the NSAID's killed. The NSAID is killing 27,000. AMA's article last week said that the third leading cause of death in the United States today is the drugs your doctors prescribe. So in this room, some people here might be thinking, let's look into this natural stuff Dr. Gordon is talking, because they're going to sell you a COX-2 inhibitor or some other wild thing, and they'll have death with them. It's just like Firestone have death with their tires. They don't talk about how many people. They really don't know how many are being killed by these drugs. Those of us that do EAB testing on our patients, there's more and more doctors doing it. We've won the war with the FDA. Your doctors will be disciplined if you're an MD in California for doing it, but naturopaths can do it and other. Anyhow, if you find a doctor that's competent with this, the biggest thing I do with it is throw away the supplements that you bought that were fraud, because half of what's in the health food store has got nothing in it, which is a shame because it makes it hard for my industry. But I'm very tied to the natural products industry because we first do no harm. But it sure as hell helps if they give us what it says on the label in the pill. If it says lipoic acid and it's going to cost you $30, it'd be nice if there was lipoic acid in there. Anyhow, so dealing with infection, we will give you an article so we won't have to cover that and stuff. I have these kind of books that we indicated to you that they're available at half off and one free. I mean, they're usually between 15 and 25 bucks, and they'll be free with any order of anything so that you get a chance to see why does this treat rheumatism, viral diseases, and cancer. And it's all based on what Dickie Fuller was talking about. We just carried it a few steps further. Because in Germany, it is a drug, and it's paid for by the German government, FDA approved. So we had to do a few things that I love everything she's doing, and you can't take too many enzymes. Most of us aren't going to ever get around to doing all this stuff and get the lead and the stuff out. So you're going to need to take enzyme, but if you clean up your body, I used to have to take acid pills, like 10 of them with every meal. I used to have gas to everything I ate. I mean, I'm in this field because the good Lord saw to it. He didn't give me all the genes. So by age 29, I had to close my medical office. I had disabling chest pain. I went into radiology just to be able to go home at 5 o'clock. I was so sick. So anyhow, I've written this story about what happens to the calcium when it leaves your bones. Folks, it winds up on your arteries, and it makes them hard, and it makes you old. Lead poisoning, I have all the references in the article I'm going to give all of you. Lead poisoning can be treated with oral EDTA, although it's only 4% absorbed. We see a 5 to 10-fold increase in the amount of lead coming out in my urine when I take EDTA by mouth, and I'm the father of the IV treatment, which I will never give up because it has anti-aging implications, but I will never go off of oral. I've been on oral since 1985, EDTA, because I understand that EDTA is what we put in the tube so the blood won't clot. And I understand that when we expose any animal to the EDTA, they live longer. So it's kind of a neat deal because it doesn't stay in your body, and it leaves. It takes out lead and other pathogens with it. So this is about the background I'm explaining to you of EDTA. And the scientific basis of chelation has got lots of fancy pictures, and I've been involved in the first book ever written. It's 350,000 copies sold. And we use that to rejuvenate your arteries. The literature, I now am up to about 6,000 references on EDTA, but I combined the oral EDTA with garlic and a $10 million trick that Dr. Lester Morrison, who was the chief of arteriosclerosis research at Loma Linda, taught me a trick. We found in the plant a heparin that we get from red algae. It has an electronegative charge, and when it is in the presence of EDTA, it safely, even for your child, because we're now finding at age 17, 30 and 40% blockages on the coronary arteries of the youngsters today. And the current position of the American Heart Association's president is 1 out of 2 Americans should be on lovastatin to lower cholesterol. Of course, you don't mind the $150 a month, and I'm sure you don't mind that it knocks out several key things in your body like coenzyme Q, but it keeps the pharmaceutical industry strong, so you don't mind. But Dr. Morrison has written the books, and I put all of his knowledge into a simple thing. We call it Garlic Plus. Arteriosclerosis is preventable, treatable, and will regress. I've tested all of my blood vessels. They are clean. They were not clean at one time. Anybody can activate an infection, like you get a cold sore in your mouth. These viral particles called cytomegalic are the sister of herpes. And they're only on 95% of us, only 95%. And they activate like the chlamydia, which we find sexually promiscuous youngsters, 60 to 70% of youngsters by age 20 have chlamydia. In the lung form, it's virtually ubiquitous. So we find these infections. I tell people, when you're sick, I will direct you to oxidative doctors. More what I do now is train doctors. I have an associate, Dr. Aldrin, that will see patients. I try to stay on the phone and email and train doctors around the world because I have had the privilege of this $1 million worth of postgraduate education as a result of helping the head of a large international company who was faced going blind at age 45. He said, Doc, he said, whatever it costs, it's cheap. He says, I've got to run this international business. So he said, go to any meeting, any place, chase down anything, find out what's true about magnetic, about acupuncture, traditional Chinese, Ayurvedic, who knows what they're doing. I've had the privilege. I've been there and looked at it. Oxidative therapies, I believe in them. I believe in hyperthermia. I believe in breathing oxygen. I go to the Oxygen Society meetings with 500 MDs and PhDs. We have all the tests we'll talk about this evening, teach you more about cancer risk. By age 50, we have cancer, folks. It isn't a question, have you? It's just a question, are you going to keep your immune system active enough to keep the cancer in control? 1 out of 2 men, if we cut the prostate carefully at age 50, already has it. 38% of women have it in their breast. About 100% of us can find some cancer at age 50 in the thyroid. So that's Dartmouth. I mean, that's real. It was front page New York Times, but nobody reads it. So if we got cancer, big deal. Let's use the blood test. The tests are real, and there isn't any blood test, these early markers like AMAS, PSA, and the ones you don't know about yet, there isn't any test we can't get down with natural treatments. Natural treatments. I have to send you to a doctor if I have the choice and have you tested to find out which of the natural treatments is the best. At the current time, the transfer factor, I call immunity, and IMKIND, which is an incredible breakthrough that works like a vaccination, has us at the point now that I can conveniently tell everybody, Wobenzyme alone, without even knowing anything about the cancer or what other treatment, increases the lifespan of the patient 30%. We have an 8-year study, Cancer Treatment Centers of America. I have the book there. The guy's an MD, PhD from Harvard, chief of oncology, and the study is real. And that's why the German government pays for it if you have cancer. And we have it approved now by this government as an orphan drug for the treatment of multiple myeloma. So anyhow, so cancer, yeah, but that's only the step at the tip of the iceberg. That's just to get rid of the fibrin, so I can then activate your white cells so they feel like they have a black belt in karate, and they'll take on the cancer cells and the infection. So it's fun. Anyhow, there isn't, so that nobody has to sit around and wait till the lump or bump. That's 7 years down the road, folks. By the time you find the lump, it's been growing for 7 years, and these tests would have told you. So I've been able to keep patients, absolutely, their anti-malignant antibody is the guys from Harvard. It's FDA approved. Medicare pays for it. And none of you have ever heard of it. Your doctor's never ordered it. And the minute your number's above 135, folks, you got cancer somewhere in your body, and I don't chase it anymore. It's so easy to get it down. I say, well, it may be prostate, it could be in your colon, it may be in your lung. I don't feel like chasing it. Let me just bring it down to normal. But somebody else said some very strong words today. They said, change something. Don't come to me and expect. You can just take some Wobenzyme and maybe a little of my Special C and maybe some of my immunity, and you can go right on living the life you were. Cancer is a wake-up call. And we have to wake up and change things. Cancer detection, it's a great subject. The tests, Oncolab is in Boston, 1-800-9CA-TEST. We'll try to cover this evening. There's so many cancer tests in the world today. Some of them you can only get, because to get them approved in this country, folks, you got to write a check for about $5 million before the government will let you sell the test. So for that reason, sometimes these tests are information. That's lucky that I was able to live so much in Europe and be in all the other countries to learn all this stuff. Immunosciences is one of the leading labs. They're in Beverly Hills. They have the ability to tell you things like, for example, wouldn't it be nice if your natural killer cell, if we put it in a solution and we put a whole bunch of bacteria in there or a whole bunch of cancer cells, wouldn't it be nice to know how many cancer cells or bacteria your natural killers will eat? That's a pretty much functional test, isn't it? That's where we specialize, at that level. We see 40 to 50% increases with the stuff that we're involved in. Now, people can't understand this thing of bladder cancer. We've proven there's a genetic defect there, but you can ramp up your enzymatic activity so the defective gene doesn't have to express itself. And it's in the literature, folks, and taking additional vitamins prevents the expression of that disease. And that's where I come from. If somebody comes to me and says, everybody in my family's got cancer, I want to know what homeopathics. I want to know, are they allergic to the wheat they're eating and the milk they're eating? I want to know, do their lead levels? You can see that this we have to kind of individualize to get maximum effects. But anyhow, body-mind is powerful. If the patient expects to die, they will. It's important to give them help. But photodynamic, this is incredible. You just take a laser, a little soft, red, gentle light, and if you first give them PhotoPoint from Miravant Corporation, it will make every cancer cell in the body so sensitive to a little bit of oxidation that they induce apoptosis and go into death from a little red light. Kind of fun. That's being done only on esophageal cancer in this country. You have to go out of the country to get that for other cancers. The Germans have used biological for years. Dr. Hager is the head of the biological movement on cancer in Germany. I have his book in German. It tells you how to use BCG vaccine, mistletoe, hyperthermia. There's no shortage. My friend Dr. Dawes takes on patients who come in on a morphine drip, less than 2 weeks to live, with prostate cancer in every cell of the body. It's mets to the brain, the bones. We cook them at 106. That particular cancer, prostate, doesn't like heat. And then we cheat. When we got it up to 106 and the cancer is really not liking it too much, we infuse a little sugar because they like sugar, and we take right out of the sugar a little bit of an anti-cancer drug, maybe used one time. The guy's up and eating the next day in his morphine drip. So that's the kind of fun that's out there in oxidative and in some of these newer therapies. But obviously we haven't got that because of the medical licensing, and it was hard for me to understand until I sit on a medical board now and have to be under Governor Holland. She's married to an MD, And she's not going to put up with any of my doctors embarrassing her. So I have to discipline my colleagues and keep them very accurate at what they tell patients so that we don't get written up in the paper, because the quackbusters are real. The Victor Herberts and the Jarvis and Elizabeth Whalen and all of these people are out there, John Renner, they're all trying to protect the public, and they're well paid for that by the vested interests they represent. But they keep me on the ball because I have to keep my doctors fully informed, and I have to keep my doctors practicing. And I have set up the International Board of Life Extension. We're going to stop now. You can turn the lights on. And it is really my pleasure to have been here today. And I'm sorry if I've given you far too much information in too little time.
Hello. Well, thanks a lot, Gary. We know you got a million more of them. And he'll be available tonight at workshop time. Now, Marisol Gonzalez, will you come up here, please? I want to ask you to spend 2 minutes here with Marisol. We'll tell you about the workshop she'll give tonight. But after you get done here, as quickly as you can, if you will, sign up for whichever workshop you want to take, should you want to take them, so we can kind of get a line on things. You get your tickets there at the registration table. Now, if you'll just listen 2 minutes to Marisol, she'll tell you about her workshop tonight. Marisol, that one works there fine also, too. No,
this one, okay, this one, okay. I come from Madrid, Spain. I've traveled quite a long ways to come here, and I will be sharing with you in the short workshop some work I've done with dolphins. We have a dolphin research program with sound and voice analysis. I will share what we've discovered in the voice after swimming with dolphins. We do cranial sacral therapy with dolphins, and we use tuning forks. And also I will be sharing how from the voice we will know the color we need, which I do with prisms. I put the color that is missing in the wavelengths that a person is not absorbing, that will slowly not only help you to regenerate physically, but will give you a whole change in your hormones and in the emotional, so it will give you a conscious expansion. This comes from all the Atlantean Mayan work that in reality is the sun through a prism that will give you the color spectrum that you're missing. So it will actually maintain your health and give you a lot of conscious expansion. So I will be sharing the work with dolphins, which actually has to do with aging and DNA as well, and with the program, the software program on biosonic voice analysis that is also being used for the nutritional database that Carl Parker will be talking about tomorrow. So I will be doing a small presentation of 3 hours about this. So thank you.
Okay, 2 more minutes. One of our Sunday speakers has arrived, and I want you to know who, if you haven't already, who Devi Kidd is. She'll be speaking Sunday afternoon, and you'll want to see her between now and then, probably too. Does this work? No, try this one.
Good afternoon, everybody. I got stuck on Highway 25, so I wasn't here earlier, so I do apologize. Oh yeah, your freeway system. I left to move. My husband and I moved here moved away from here 3 years ago, and I'm telling you, it's just escalated beyond belief. I was just telling Dean, I thought people used to work in offices, but I guess their primary job now is just sitting on the freeways out here. I thought Sacramento was bad, but really you guys do take the prize. In any event, Sunday I'm going to speak about something that's very important to this industry, and that is the FDA. Not very many people know that the Food and Drug Administration derives its jurisdiction from international treaty, and this has tremendous ramifications for the industry and the government's ability to shut you down. And you can make no mistake that as the pharmaceutical industry continues to see a decline in their profit structure, I just was hearing on the news yesterday when coming through Grand Junction that Eli Lilly's stock had dropped like 30% because they're going to lose the patent on the wonderful Prozac, and that there was another pharmaceutical company that was looking, you know, very greedily at taking over this patent. And if any of you are on the internet or read Media Bypass, and you know the extensive articles I've done on Prozac and the school shootings throughout the United States, and the fact that the only common denominator on all 23 school shootings since 1993, every single defendant, all of these poor children, all of them, with the exception of Dylan Klebold because his autopsy is still sealed, and I did come out here and do the investigation myself, every single one of those children were on Prozac or Luvox or Ritalin. It is just epidemic in this country. But in any event, I'm going to speak Sunday about the particular issue of the FDA and the treaty, because this is something this industry needs to become very familiar with, because I'm a very big supporter of alternative medicine and healing, and it's just wonderful what Dean and his entire staff have done in bringing everybody together to get this most important information, because I'm a walking, talking billboard for this industry. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Davy. She's also one of the prime movers in the free USA Today ad that's available to everybody out at the registration table. That's the one that was on the IRS. So pick that up. Make sure you get at least one of those before you go home. Okay, now if you want to go to a workshop, just pick up a ticket, $20 at the registration table. Then you can decide, I guess, even later which one you want to go to. If not, the exhibit area is now open and free to the public. If you have anybody that wants to come at night, each night that exhibit area and everything will be open and free to the public. Okay, we'll stick it under the podium here. It'll probably be fine.